In terms of crypto news, there is some really interesting developments in terms of Web 2 incumbents and how they're pivoting toward Web 3. And I'm talking about Square. They are changing their name, their corporate name, to Block. Sounds a lot like blockchain. That's effective on December 10th. And it's on the heels of Jack Dorsey's Twitter resignation as he focuses his time on his payments firm Square full time. So I think that's a pretty big deal, Emily.
It's a pretty big deal. If you've been following Jack and Square, it's not super surprising because, he's been invested in Bitcoin for a long time. His Twitter bio is literally Bitcoin. And also Square itself is very involved in the Bitcoin space. I think they hold about 5% of their cash reserves in Bitcoin. You can pay with Bitcoin on the Square Cash app. They're getting into Bitcoin mining. They're getting into decentralized finance. So this is more just formalizing something that's been going on for a while.
Yeah, Jack Dorsey's Square Crypto is rebranding itself to Spiral as well. They're saying that they're focused on making Bitcoin the planet's preferred currency. So certainly it's an interesting shift and an interesting way that we're seeing the reception of Jack Dorsey versus Mark Zuckerberg when Facebook changed their name to Meta, said they're going to dive into the metaverse. So there's a lot more skepticism and a lot more reception in terms of Jack Dorsey coming to the fray.
I think the best thing that happened when Facebook changed their name to Meta was Wendy's put out a tweet saying they're changing their names to Meat. People just don't like certain characters in tech, and Zuck seems to be one of them. Of course, Jack has a different reputation, which he's cultivated. But interesting. Hey, guys, over at the Block Crypto, get your lawyers, call them up, find out what's going on. Maybe you have a trademark infringement. Just saying.
All right. Well, joining us now to discuss even further is Beth Kindig, founder and CEO at tech stock research firm IO Fund. Hello there, Beth. So, companies don't change their names lightly. What is the significance underlying this name change, in your view?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I would say Square is technically the one to get disrupted by blockchain. They charge quite a few fees. They don't really cut back on credit card fees or merchant fees. The last time I had looked at it, I wrote an analysis about a year and a half ago on why PayPal, Square, and a few of the others better figure something out, because blockchain solves a lot of issues around transaction fees, and Square contributes to that. So I know that Jack Dorsey has one foot in the Bitcoin community and the blockchain community, but at the same time, I want to be really clear that the promise of decentralized finance and decentralized transactions is that all of the revenue that Square is making would be dispersed more evenly across, the shop owners or the consumers. So to me, it's a defensive move. This is not a move coming from strength. And I would say the same about Facebook's Meta, and the same about Jack Dorsey stepping down from Twitter. From on my perspective, I think the minute a decentralized social media, blockchain company starts to attract a certain amount of monthly active users, it could potentially explode. There's just a lot of pain points around centralized social media. So if you look at some of the issues, whether it's antitrust in Europe, whether it's privacy issues left and right. I've been writing about privacy issues with Facebook since about 2014, so I follow that very closely. And in 2018, we hit a peak, Cambridge Analytica, and Twitter has a lot of the same issues, right? There's a lot of bots on Twitter. So I actually have also written about this with news articles and news sites. 60% of the activity is driven by bots. So we're all hanging out and spending a lot of time in these. On these online properties that could be greatly improved, and they can't be improved with the current structure today until that's invented. So that would be my 2 cents on it.
So where do we find crypto fitting in? Where do we find crypto fitting in the blocks market? The back end over at Block. Like where is it going to fit in terms of? Do you see that the transactions getting more decentralized, so to speak, on their back end? Are they going to restructure a lot of the technology towards decentralized technologies and the like?
Yeah, I think it's really, I would say it's not super clear because on one hand, Jack Dorsey has said he's a Bitcoin maximalist to some extent. He's only been interested in Bitcoin, yet that probably is not the right token for mobile payments. Obviously, it's very scarce scalability. It's not very stable. There's a lot of stable coin tie-ins with Curve and things like that. So the backbone is what I'm saying is that I think there's a lot of room for a company like Curve, perhaps something that can be a market maker that's very stable or seeks stability. And that's the kind of technology that I think is probably a little more interesting to me.
So, Beth, what do you think is going to happen to Twitter? Do you think we're going to start seeing some really big changes? Is it going to become a very different product? What's your prediction?
It's always tough with a CEO change because as much as people may say the founder has run his or her course, the problem is that they also had the vision. And can Twitter grow from here? Can it improve from here? Like I said, there's a lot of bots on that site. And then if you're a new user, and you're trying to get on Twitter, it's very intimidating because the idea is that you have to have a certain number of followers in order to be important. Well, when you're brand new, that doesn't work very well. That's why Facebook had such massive adoption, is because, new user John Doe or Jane Doe gets on and they make all these connections. And it doesn't really matter if you have a 100 or 2,000 connections on Facebook. On Twitter, it matters quite a bit. People won't listen to you, and whatnot. So they've always had a user acquisition problem, if you will. How do you grow those users? And then on the other side of it, as an investor, I look at things very differently than a social media user might look at things. But as an investor, knowing that there's so many bots on the site, will advertisers really pay top dollar for that? So anytime an advertiser runs a campaign on Twitter, a good portion of that activity came from bots, and they could potentially be paying for that. I've seen campaigns have to pay for that. So you'll see 50,000 clicks, you'll see 0 conversions. Advertisers struggle there. So I'm just trying to say there's a lot of problems from an investor's standpoint today for Twitter. This is just my personal opinion. I look at this all day long. As you know, we specialize in tech stocks and we've specialized in crypto. I've covered it since 2013 and officially brought it to the stock market in 2019. But basically, I'm just trying to communicate here that there's a lot to be improved on, and can the CTO do it? That's a big question mark for sure, because the person with the vision is now stepping down. At the same time,
you have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
You say you have a crystal ball on tech stocks. So I'm wondering, when looking at Facebook, Twitter, and Square as they position themselves from Web 2 to Web 3.0, where do you see the best positioned companies in terms of their messaging, their direction? What are your thoughts?
For stocks or for crypto?
For stocks.
Yeah, so we are looking for large addressable markets that have been unmet. When I look at social media, a lot of that demand has been met. They have some serious disruptors coming on their heels from Web3. So social media is a tough one right now, I think, for stock investors. And it's interesting because you'll see some more traditional investors who really like it because the cash flow is there. The business makes sense to them. We are, I would say, moving into next year, we like semiconductors a lot. That really led our portfolio this year. We moved heavily into semiconductors in 2019, and that really came through for us this year. The whole world is changing in terms of how important semiconductors are. We do not believe they're cyclical anymore. Cloud is very resilient. And as you may have noticed, us tech stock investors are getting a little beat up in November. And I've been here many times. So one of the biggest sell-offs was Q3 2019. It came out of seemingly nowhere. It was a bigger sell-off than COVID, March 2020. Right now, we just reached such oversold levels that the Russell 2000 is more oversold right now than it was in March of 2020. Long story short, we stay with the product, we stay with the fundamentals, and we hold firm during these time periods because it's impossible to discount every single company and say that in these conditions, which is high inflation, CPI number came in high, that they won't perform. Cloud will perform, and it's because it drives down costs. So the minute we saw this in March of 2020 as well, when a CEO goes to look at their budget, they're going to cut certain things, and there's going to be some cloud products that do very well in that environment because they're saving a company a lot of money. So, work from home is a great trend like that.
Yeah, along those lines. I mean, you were talking about the fundamentals, and you've also said recently that PE ratios are going to matter this coming year, and that, of course, means that earnings are going to matter. Where do you see those earnings happening, particularly in the crypto space? And as well, do you have any pandemic plays now that the Omicron variant has become the tip of everyone's tongue right now? It didn't even matter a couple of weeks ago. But are there any pandemic plays along those lines that you might see, taking off in the next few weeks and months?
Right now, the market let me put it this way. The market was selling off about the variant. I guess I'll answer that one first. The market was selling off a month before we heard of the new variant. So is this market sell off about the variant? I would argue it's about the inflation number coming in high. What is the Fed going to do? There's a lot of nervousness there. And one of the best things I feel we can do, and I can only speak for ourselves, everybody has to determine their own financial profile, is keep a large allocation to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an amazing hedge for inflation. This is everything Bitcoin maximalists have been waiting for, is the United States to have some of this economic weakness, if you will, around inflation and all those trillions of dollars that we spent. When will that catch up to us? Bitcoin is the right hedge for that, and we've been pursuing that hedge for some time. Then these other these other quality tech stocks that do have earnings that are profitable. We've seen a big push. We always seem to see these pushes towards IPOs. They have very little financial history in the public markets. They have lockup expirations. Insiders can sell out, and they tend to do that when the lockup expires. So that's kind of I always consider it a little bit of a pump and dump because it gets pumped so hard, and then all of a sudden it's nowhere. Those are the kinds of stocks that are going to be too high beta to perform well moving forward. We had this big SPACs. SPACs were another bubble. Those are the kinds of companies that I would avoid at all costs when the word inflation is in the news. And bottom line is not been very important, to be honest with you. A lot of investors have forgotten about the bottom line. We are doubling down and making sure that the bottom line on every single one of our companies is strong right now.